every day and every moment to improve our mental health is actually focus on our language. What are we saying to ourselves? Are you worried about something that you don't want to happen? Or
Right.
what is it that you do want to happen, and shift your focus there instead? So that's the first point. And the second point too, you talked about adaptability. And I love that word. And I think that does encompass what anti-fragility is about. Whether you believe we evolved from gorillas or not, right? Evolution is kind of this idea of things adapting to stressors, to chaos, to uncertainty over time. So you think about your lifetime and you think about how, in a very micro way, we can do the same thing as humans. From the moment we're born to the moment we're put 6 feet under the ground, we too can evolve and we can adapt. Unlike, other things that are more fragile, that can't withstand the pressure, that break under pressure.
All right, y'all. What's going on? It is your boy Easy Bake Oven. What's up, y'all? So today it's a little different. All right. Now, yeah, I used to hear ads run through my stuff for other people. All right. This is probably the first real time the ad is for me. All right. So P.S.A, Prodigy Sport Advantage Stations, has expanded far beyond just the podcast. It is now a writing service. All right. And at that, a ghostwriting service. So we do it anonymously and take care of your needs. All right. Homework assistant, product and profile descriptions, grant writing, resumes, cover letters, templates, books, ghostwriter book too. Anything you can think of, articles, all that good stuff. PSA, the Ghostwriter Solution, can do it. So go over to PSAthepodcast.com and you can see all the services there with all their descriptions. Okay, because I know I missed some. And also you can reach out to me at theprodigyperspective@gmail.com and we can take care of all of that for you too. Peace. All right, y'all, what is going on? Just like that, we are back for track 5 of Industry Plan. We are going through this pretty quickly. 11-week thing kind of going on, and we're on week 5. So because halfway through 10 is 5, but it's 11, and there's no 5.5 episodes. So is this can we consider this the halfway mark? I think so. I think we'll just go ahead and let it ride. I don't think nobody gonna tell on us today. I hope, but let's just go ahead and just let this ride. It's like the halfway mark. A lot of good people that came through already. I can't say it for sure just yet if this is going to be an all feature project this series, because usually it's from here and there that are just me. But I like the fact that we redo things every season, and every album tells a story, and this one is yet another story. So we started all the way back from the first episode with EJ at the studio with the seed form of the plant. Then we moved up to the germination and development and the vegetation part. So now we're at a stage of the plant where it is dormant, and it aligns with someone today who's going to drop a lot of knowledge. So, but we're going to get into that. Let me not get ahead of myself. So let me get into this week's meme. All right. This week's meme says, look at it like this. Had that tragedy not happened, you wouldn't be where you are today. I feel like sometimes in life we think everything, we all, I think at this age, I hope we know that everything is not rainbows and puppies and unicorns all the time. But I think that sometimes when the worst things happen, we think that there's no way to recover. But my logic is, as long as you're not dead, you can recover. Now, I've never been dead before, so once you did, I don't know where you go from there. But that's the kind of thing. Inspirations for this week. The infamous how we count all our sufferings pure joy. And that's hard to do, but if you really adapt that mentality, it makes you look at things a little differently. Obviously, industry plant, the album, the series going on right now, and of course the dormancy stage, and then of course a quote by a podcaster I keep up with. He says he was in an interview and he talked about how if you never had that L, you never know how to handle the dub. So the translation of that, for those that may not know, is basically had you not have had a loss, had you not have lost anything, had you not have went through some type of trial and tribulation, when the winds do come, because they're going to come eventually, you wouldn't know how to deal with it. You wouldn't have been ready for it. You can't graduate without a test. So look at it like that and keep that in your back of your mind as we kind of go through today's episode. And yeah, some stuff I gotta ask because I'm a little confused about some things. So, all right. So before I introduce my guest, I have to go through the infamous phrase, which is happy hour. All right. So while we at happy hour today, I just got a few things I gotta ask about. I'm thinking about right now. So first of all, have you noticed that whenever you trying to do right, temptation comes. And this ain't always sexual, but like, say for instance, you trying to do right and eat right. All of a sudden, you at work, everybody wants to have a potluck, and everybody ordering pizza, and everybody got donuts and all this stuff. Do you fold under pressure in that situation? Let me know in the comments in this episode. Please let me know. Do I not like I used to? I used to fold real bad, but now I kind of got to the logic of when you get those results on the scale that you want to see, you kind of catch yourself like, nah, I can't. I ain't trying to be mad this Saturday. Like, nah, this Sunday, Wednesday, I ain't trying to be mad. So you kind of get yourself together and do it like that. But it can be annoying. Also, something else I noticed when y'all in this Little Mermaid. So y'all went to go see the Little Mermaid, and I know y'all keep going to see it all summer long, and good for you, right? I seen somebody, one of my friends' story, and she wasn't her close friend, so obviously it wasn't to the people, but still, she had made a story on Instagram, and she was like, "Oh, a little Hallie and a little Casamigos." I'm like, y'all just be doing anything. You went to go see the Little Mermaid drinking. Now, I'm not saying people don't go to the movies and drink, obviously. Now, hopefully they don't start and they ain't bringing their own snacks. I didn't see some people bring some stuff in the theaters. You like, how did you get that in there? And they like brought like full meals. Like one time, somebody seen somebody bring some Benihana. How you bring Benihana in the movies? Now, I will say, if you haven't been to the movies in a long time, they have upgraded as far as their meals are like. It's not just hot dogs and nachos and stuff no more. They got like full course stuff. But like people really they creative with that. I wish I knew how to do that. I mean, a lot of time it'd be women that do it, so they just bring their big old purses and stuff. But like with me, I mean, I could put it in my pockets, but that wouldn't look right. But that's why you got to go to the movie with people. And then on top of that, back to the story. So you watching the Little Mermaid. So I had to comment on that because I wasn't gonna let her make it with that. So she's watching to the Little Mermaid, talking about she drinking some Casamigos. I said, really? And she was like, yeah. She said, I'm about to start singing. I said, well, I hope you start singing a song, and I hope the people in the theater throw some tomatoes at you. And so she got mad. She didn't get mad for real, but But still, that's stupid. That's stupid. You went to go see a kids movie drinking, you ain't got no kids. Now, at least that would make sense. Like if you had some kids, like they get on my nerves, I got them the movie to watch, and then I'm gonna have me a drink. But you ain't got no kids, and you drinking at the kids movie. Is that weird? Am I tripping? Am I in the wrong? Because I could be. I don't know. That's just something I had thought about. It wasn't that too. We keeping the happy hour a little light today. So, all right. So now, after my little rant, I got to introduce my guest today because I could do this all day. So let me go ahead and introduce my guest, Courtney. What is going on?
Izzy, how are you doing? Dude, everything you were saying about Little Mermaid, going to the movies, and you don't have kids, I'm just over here laughing. Like, so true. So true. I'm really happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. So obviously, I spilled the beans to the audio people and told the people your name. But for the audio people, can you tell the people your full name, where you from, and where do you live now?
Absolutely. I'm Courtney Elmer. I am from the great state of Louisiana down here in the South. I grew up, born and raised about an hour outside of New Orleans. And we live about 10 minutes outside of downtown New Orleans right now. Born and bred, true Southern girl.
Okay, okay. Good, good. So tell the people what it is that you do.
Yeah, so the ethos behind everything we do within my company, which is called the EffortLESS Life, really has to do with this idea of one of the biggest things we're going to be talking about today, antifragility. But what does that mean? I say that word and people are like, that's cool. What is that?
Right,
And a lot of times, especially for us as millennials, we have gone through really hard stuff. We've gone through trauma, mental health issues. There's a lot that we have faced in our life. And we also know how delicate sometimes, I'm speaking for myself, that our mental health state can be.
right,
And often we have this tendency to think that, gosh, if I can just get stronger mentally, get better equipped to handle challenges that come my way, life's adversity, the ups, the downs that we all experience, then I could be more resilient and this stuff won't affect me as much. It's not going to derail me as much. I'm not going to go into a depression because something crazy happened this week.
hmm,
And what most people don't realize is that there's actually a step beyond resilience. There's another rung on the ladder. Resilience just means getting stronger in the face of difficult things. But anti fragility means actually growing as a person because of it. And so everything that we do, I basically say my definition for anti fragility is simply growing through whatever it is you go through.
right,
And that is the heartbeat of everything that we do. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. We talk a lot about the adversity of growing a business as an entrepreneur. There's lots of ups and downs there. There's lots of ups and downs in our lives. And especially as millennials, I feel like we were born in a generation where, I don't know, we were born into adversity. I don't know if the boomers had it as bad or if Gen Z is struggling as much as we have struggled, but there's been some tough times when we've lived through natural disasters, global pandemics. I mean, it's been pretty crazy. And yet here we are, we're still going.
Well, I think that's great that you highlighted all of that because she kind of gave like a preface to how we're going to go through the episode. But I will speak on the whole millennial thing because, real quick, like as young millennials, because we're not that old, but even just millennials in general, like we, it's a blessing and a curse because although, like she said, we've been through these pandemics, natural disasters, the same transitions of just the world, we were the first, and I seen a meme about it, or it was a quote paragraph, something, and it was just talking about how our generation is the most, really the best, because as far as like TV, as far as movies and seeing the transition with technology, and how we were the group of kids and growing up where we had technology, but we also still went outside. Whereas the generation before, they just were outside. And this new generation, you can't get them to go outside for nothing. So we were that happy medium, I feel, because we did a lot of both. And that's the only generation that has done both. So, and like I said, it's good and bad, but there's a reason why. I'll say this and move to my question, but there's a reason why this generation, I feel, has the most mental trauma because of it's a lot going on. So now you briefly talked about your online entrepreneurs, and my first question would be, could you explain how this episode especially would impact your online entrepreneurs and how they can benefit from this episode?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I feel like as a millennial and an entrepreneur, we're not only dealing with all of the internal stuff that we're
Mhm.
dealing with every day as a person, but we're dealing with the rapid pace at which the outside world moves, especially in the online space. I mean,
Right.
look back in 2020 when TikTok came on the scene. TikTok didn't exist before 2020 and now it's got billions of users. Same with Instagram as it's grown through the years. I remember back in college when you only could get on Facebook because you were in college. Like that was it. You couldn't get on it otherwise, right? So we've seen so many changes, to your point about how quickly things move, and all the more when you're growing a business in this digital day and age. And so what that means is you're going to be faced with even more challenges than maybe someone 40 years ago who started a business in their hometown on a corner of a busy street, and they've got all this foot traffic in the door and they were an overnight success. It's
Right.
going to look different. So this will be very relevant. Everything we talk about here today about how to navigate those ups and downs.
All right, so I'm gonna tie it in together. I kind of brought it up earlier, but I just have to ask now, since we industry plant, right? So, if you could be a plant, what plant would you be and why?
Oh, this is a lovely question. My favorite plant is a flower called a peony. It
Okay.
looks kind of like a rose. It's got a big, big petals, lots of petals. I think it's really beautiful. But I think also, like most plants, it starts off as this ugly little seed.
Hmm.
There's nothing to look at. And then of course it goes into the ground. It dies in order to be, to boost it. What am I trying to say here? To grow, right? To put
Right.
down roots and to grow and put up that little sprout. And it's so delicate in that stage. It's so fragile. And as it grows, it does become stronger and becomes stronger. And then on the other end of that, you got this really beautiful flower that everyone can admire, can look at and say, wow, that flower, if you really think about the journey of a flower or any plant, went through a lot to get here to look like this. Anyway, that's
Right.
my favorite flower. So yeah, there's a lot of beauty in it.
Okay. Oh, good. I never heard of that plant before, so that's good to know. All right. So now I'm going to ask you a few words, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. You ready? No
Yeah,
right or
let's do
wrong
it.
answer.
Okay.
All right. When you hear the word stress, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, this heavy feeling in the back of my neck and chest.
Okay. When you hear the word shocked, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Hmm. Just being speechless,
And when
losing
you
the voice.
and when you hear the word dormancy, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Being in a season of growth, but not knowing it.
Ooh, okay. So the first definition, stress, everything came from Merriam-Webster. Stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain caused by adverse circumstances. Shocked is surprised and upset. And then dormancy, the state of having normal physical functions suspended or slowed down for a period of time, also known as a deep sleep. So I thought that was interesting, especially that last part. All right, so let's move into the next segment, which is what does this have to do with mental health? And I had to create a segment to elaborate more, and so we had it more refined in this area. So now you have an educational background in psychology and a personal journey that involves significant emotional resilience. Could you talk about the role of mental health in entrepreneurship and why it's especially critical for online entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. Every day in entrepreneurship, a lot of times we think the challenges are outside of us, and sure, we may face, the app crashing or the website being overloaded or not getting DMs of people asking how to work with you and trying to figure out marketing and it's just not working, right? There's all those everyday challenges. But the inward beliefs that we've carried with us throughout our life are often the biggest hurdle that we face. And a lot of times we don't even realize it. It holds us back. And so it can be really difficult to maintain a state of mental health, which might look a little different for everyone, right? There might be personal definitions of what that looks like, what it means to you to be mentally healthy. For
Right.
me, it means feeling like this is going to sound funny, things are under control, right? Which is an illusion. Things are never in our control. I mean, we can control how we react to something, but sometimes external circumstances are not within our control. But for me, that feeling of mental health is a feeling of stability. It's a feeling of ease. And as an entrepreneur, that's not always how I feel
Right.
encountering these external and these internal challenges that we have to go up against.
Okay. So now, as a cancer survivor, you have personally experienced the power of mindset resilience. So, how has this shaped your perspective on mental health? And what advice would you give to any entrepreneurs that may be facing any mental health challenges right now?
Yeah. So, actually, Izzy, prior to my cancer diagnosis, which I'll tell you that story in just a moment, but in my late teens and early 20s, I was also diagnosed with OCD,
Hmm.
anorexia, and depression.
Okay.
And whenever, I sat down with the psychologists and all who were evaluating my case at that time in my life, they said, you really need inpatient therapy. You need to be in a program. We need to get you back to health as quickly as possible. It's pretty dire situation here. And I said no. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And I said no because I knew that I needed to work through that on my own, of course, with a team of trained professionals, but not in an inpatient type facility. because I knew that if I did not work through that on my own and actually heal whatever, was not working as it should be, and within my brain, within myself, my beliefs about myself, all of that, I knew that I would never fully recover from
Mm.
that. So I went through that, and what it looked like was a team of 3 therapists, one of whom I saw twice a week. She was an hour away, an hour drive each there and back. Another one who I had to go to with my family, which was crazy. Imagine going to therapy with, your family members and all of this childhood stuff that comes with that. And then a
Right.
personal therapist who worked just with me on how I was feeling as I worked through this and shifting my own mental state and all of that. So this process took about 3 years to fully move through. And I had gotten to that point where I felt like I had my life back. I had gotten a job. I was holding down a job. I was growing in my career, climbing that ladder. I was doing well and had met the love of my life. We had just gotten married, gone on a beautiful honeymoon, came home, and I had a follow-up visit with my doctor a couple of days after we got home from that trip. Because prior to the wedding, I was real sick with some sinus issues going on. And they had run some tests and they said, look, come back when you're back in town. We'll just do our follow-up with you then.
Right.
And so this was, I was 25 years old. I walked in the doctor's office that day and I was getting some really weird vibes from my doctor. I mean, he was not a man of many words, but this day he was just kind of like very tight-lipped and wasn't saying a whole lot. And he said, look, Courtney, I not going to be here very long today. I'm going to actually turn your case over to a colleague of mine who has more expertise in this area. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So another doctor walks into the room and she sits down and she looks me in the eye and she said, Courtney, you have thyroid cancer.
Oh, wow.
And she said, the good news, it's very treatable. But the bad news is that it started to spread and we need to operate immediately. So I've cleared a spot for you on my schedule. And I'll see you in surgery next Monday. That was less than a week away.
Oh, wow.
And so, Izzy, my whole life changed in that moment because I had gone through hard things before as far as my mental health, right? And I had overcome those things and life was finally in a good place. And then all of a sudden it was like right back where I started, where I just kind of went back into this depression. I realized that the path I was on wasn't the path I wanted to be on.
Right.
I knew I needed to make some changes. I was afraid to make those changes. And it sent me into a dark place where I didn't know what the next step was. But had I not gone through all of that therapy that I went through those years before, I wouldn't have been able to handle the cancer diagnosis and that situation and that depression that I was in that stage as well as I did. And if you're someone listening who's ever struggled with depression, you know that when you are depressed, you have no energy to even do the work.
Right.
And it can feel you could feel like it's such the state of despair because you don't know, you want to fix things, you want to feel better, but you don't really know how and you don't have the energy. But I will say that having gone through that prior experience, with the OCD and the depression and the eating disorder, actually gave me the lessons and the tools that I needed to go through this next experience when I faced depression again, in this with this cancer diagnosis.
Well, you're cancer free now, so that's great. It's good that you caught it when you did. Certain everybody doesn't make it, and but you did. So it was good that, like you said, you highlighted how you went through all that stuff leading up to it. And had you not, you might have. You don't know what you would have. You just don't know. And so it's good that And again, it's the part of the episode that highlights and goes into detail about why it's good that we have to go through certain things and how we think it's the worst thing on earth. But had this not happened, you would not have been successful in overcoming your cancers, the cancer, because you had cancer. It wasn't even a scare, it was legit, you had it. And, so even with that, so let me ask a few questions about that. So real quick, so at the beginning of the story, you made the comment about you didn't want to be too reliant on the mental health practitioners and they wanted to kind of was it fear as well, along with you said you wanted to do it on your own, and I'm get that too, but was it a little bit of fear, like I don't want to be in this place, or did you feel like maybe you thought like I'll look crazy? Did you care what other people thought? Like what was going through your head?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of fear, probably a little bit of ego. When we were initially visiting with all of these professionals, they said, look, here's the facility we want you to put you in. It's going to be a 6 or 8 week program. We're going to put you in. There's a feeding program, right, to help your body kind of get back to where it needs to be, a healthy weight. and then we're going to work on the mental health side. So go take a look at the facility. They'll give you a tour. And I remember going to that facility and I just felt like I could not live there for 8 weeks. There was no way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that that facility has helped many, many people. And I also knew walking in there and walking out of there that day that that wasn't for me. It wasn't. And I knew that even though I couldn't overcome it on my own completely, I didn't really have those skills yet to be able to work through all of what I was experiencing and that I would need help. I just didn't want to do it in that environment. I
Right.
felt like that would be more harmful than helpful.
So how long did it take you to recover from the surgery? Because you said you had less than a week. So let's go actually go back. I don't even want to leave this point right here just yet. So you find out less than a week you have cancer. So who's the first person you tell? What is their reaction? Do you make a Facebook status? So those are those people. Like, don't even look at me like that. People, it's there people like, hey, guess what? So did you make a Facebook status, an Instagram post? Did you tell anybody? Did you tell you what did you do?
Yeah. So my husband was actually there with me in the doctor's office that day because I think he was still off of work at that point. Because, like I said, this was 2 days after we got home from our honeymoon. So it was literally like wedding, honeymoon, cancer diagnosis. So he was there with me. And after that, we drove to my parents' office, which was in the downtown area of where this medical facility was. And I sat both my parents down and we told them the news. And I just remember both of them tearing up and just, they now as a parent, I can relate more to how they might have felt in that moment of just being totally helpless and just feeling for me and what I was going through and about to go through, but not knowing what to do about it, not having any power or control over that. And I can only imagine what that really was like for them. And then slowly from there, we began to tell other family. I don't think I put it on social media until much later that I've started to tell my story. I tend to, when I go through dark seasons in my life, I just kind of take a break from social media. Don't doomsday scroll and I don't log in. And, my friends probably wonder what's happened to Courtney. She's going through something again. But it's one of those things where I just have to kind of put my walls up and put my boundaries up and say, hey, this is me carving out space for me to get through whatever it is I need to get through. So we kept the circle pretty tight. And then eventually I started telling my story.
And so how long was the recovery time after?
Yeah. So what's crazy about thyroid cancer is that the most effective way to treat it after surgery it's called radioactive iodine therapy. And what this is they actually give you a radioactive iodine tablet that you ingest. And the theory behind it is that those cells within your thyroid area will absorb that iodine. There's no other cell in the body that absorbs that. So it'll effectively target those cells and kind of get rid of anything that might be residual there. But it also makes your entire body radioactive, and you have to be in quarantine in a hospital facility for 2, 3, 4 days, however long it takes for the radiation to leave your body. So I had this surgery. It's a 2 to 4 week recovery process from that alone to where I felt like I could function again. I could lift heavy things, that sort of thing. Then I went through the radiation therapy and then was in quarantine for a few days, had to come home and follow all these strict protocols. And so overall total was probably a 3 to 4 month process before I was to a point where they were then able to just start monitoring me, going forward.
Okay, well, that was your superhero origin story. Like, how you talking about you radioactive. Next thing you know, you saving people from falling off buildings and stuff, fighting crime. So look, you didn't became a superhero because you did it. So that's good to know that got over all of that. How long ago was this?
So what is the date today? As of the date of this recording, 2 days from now, it'll be 10 years. It'll be my 10-year anniversary of being cancer
Wow.
free.
Okay, so what you gonna celebrate? Do you celebrate it every year? Like I made it.
Yeah, every year it's funny how because in the beginning it was a big date and it was always kind of a celebration and it's 1 year, it's 2 years. Last year the date came and went and I didn't even notice it. But I took that as a really good sign that
Yeah.
that fear is gone. I'm not worried about it coming back. I believe I'm healthy. Things are good. Everything always was and will be okay. And that's, a mantra that I tend to live by. But this year it's 10 years, and it's on the 10th of the month. So it's 10th of the month, 10 years. So I do want to do something. I haven't given much thought as to how to celebrate that. I think, if anything, maybe something simple like just writing a letter to myself and, just reflecting on how far I've come and what I've gotten through to get here, even though I'm not where I want to be yet. We all have those goals and dreams we're chasing after, but to look back and just be so grateful for all that this journey has taught me.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. So again, congratulations and celebrating those 10 years of overcoming thyroid cancer.
Thank you.
So now, mental health, there's an increased focus on in the entrepreneurial space. And there's a few things I have to ask. But the first thing is, what steps can entrepreneurs take to ensure that their mental well-being while pursuing their goals, especially in times of adversity? So what is something that, they can do, and how can they then incorporate these practices into their business strategy?
Yeah. I would say stop chasing balance and start putting boundaries in place.
Okay.
A lot of times we look for this elusive ideal of work-life balance. And as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to find because we love what we do. We would gladly spend 14 hours a day doing it because we love it, right? But we all know that's not sustainable. We're going to burn out. It's not going to be something we can maintain. And because it's something that we love and enjoy, and for whatever the reason is that you do what you do, for me, it's I want to make an impact. I want to change people's lives. I want to transform the way they think. I want to help them use their voice to catalyze positive change in the world. There's so many good things about what I do and why I do it. But if I'm not careful, if I don't have the right boundaries in place, I'll never be able to achieve that state of stability like we were talking about earlier, where, I'm healthy mentally and physically, and I'm taking care of myself as much as I'm taking care of my clients. So I'd say first and foremost, you need to look at your boundaries. I feel like, and this might be a generalization, but as millennials, we are people pleasers to a large
Mhm.
degree.
Yeah.
And it's something I've struggled with through the years. And when you're running a business, already there's this expectation that you go the extra mile for your client. You want to deliver a good service. You want to do a good job for them so that they're happy and, they're not coming after you saying, I want my money back, right? You want to deliver a good product for them. But sometimes this comes at our own expense. And it can really take a toll on you mentally if you're not careful.
Especially in terms of anti-fragility, because I think when it comes to business strategies and practices, and we're trying to, we get into that place of being stuck, or not even just stuck, that place of like, I even put myself on blast. What happens when, what would your advice be to somebody who their podcast was booming and then out of nowhere, it's just the numbers just go on a decline? Like, what do you do then? Did that the time where you say, which you may question, do I quit? Or do you say like, well, let me take a step back and see what's working and what's not working and try to see what is the disconnect? Because why do we see such a major decline to then now a major incline to now major decline? Like what happened, and those are the questions that go through people's minds. And it does, and sometimes I do believe that you may need to take a little break, and sometimes you kind of got to just take it to the chin and just kind of readjust and continue to move forward. So what would your advice be in that specific instance?
Stop looking at where other people are and stay in your lane. Because so often, especially in the world of social media, I know we have all heard it before, and we all know it's not good to compare ourselves to someone else's journey,
Right.
but we do it anyway. It's easy to. We see the highlight reel. We look at these people that we follow, that we listen to on podcasts, that we follow on TikTok or Instagram, that we like. We feel like we know them. They share great content. We enjoy what they share. But usually we look up to those people because we aspire to be where they are.
Right.
And we're not there yet. And it creates this gap. And when you have that gap, first of all, it takes you out of the present moment and prevents you from being happy where you are right now. And second of all, it creates a tension internally, mentally, that becomes an inner voice in your mind saying, you got to work harder. You're not there yet. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you where you thought you should be by now? And we could tend to be critical of ourselves, really beat ourselves up, and we often take our own selves out of the game. And I don't know if you follow Alex Hormozy. I really respect him. He's a great leader. He shares a lot of great business wisdom. And he talks about really entrepreneurship is not about anything else other than staying in the game as long as possible, staying in the game longer than other people will. So I like to think about that sometimes when I notice, like, look, I have a podcast and I notice we're plateauing or the numbers drop. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened here? And in those moments, I always look back at, first of all, why am I doing this?
Right.
Just reconnect with that. It's easy to get off track when we're chasing those numbers and, we want to get to that goal that we set for ourselves. So why am I doing it? And secondly, what are others doing in the industry that maybe I should consider doing? And what are others doing that's not for me? And that's a really important question we often fail to ask. Because so often we try to imitate what other leaders are doing, thinking it'll works for them, it'll work for us,
Right.
but it may not. And so we got to be willing to question, always question what you're doing, but also be willing to put your own stake in the ground and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, not because everyone else is doing it, but because it's what I feel is best for me.
Good stuff. All right. So y'all make sure y'all taking notes with stuff like that. So now anti-fragility is a concept introduced by Nassim Nichols Taleb in his book Anti-Fragile: Things That Gain from Disorder. While anti-fragility primarily relates to systems and entitles that benefit from shocks and volatility, I can't get the word today. It can be applied to mental health as well. However, it's important to note that the application of anti-fragility to mental health is an emerging field, and there may not be an abundance of studies specifically linking the two. Now, here are some things that we can link because I did find some research and how anti-fragility aligns with mental health. All right, so it says that stress as a stimulus for growth. I thought that was interesting. Anti-fragility suggests that exposure to manageable stressors can lead to adaptation and growth. Similarly, moderate challenges and stresses in life can help build resilience and coping mechanisms in individuals. So research supports that the idea experiencing and successfully managing stress can enhance mental resilience and well-being. That's the thing. I feel bad for those people who are like sheltered their whole lives, and then when they get into those environments where they just hit on all sides, they don't know what to do. I'm not gonna lie, I'm 29. I done been through a lot, and so the stuff that happens to me, I tell people all the time, I don't think it's real. Like I feel like I'm in a video game. So I definitely can relate to being in a position of like, oh, I've been through that, because certain people can't deal with things. I feel bad for these people who get on these platforms and they're being dragged and they're being attacked for something they said or did, when it's like, oh, it didn't happen to me even before I started the podcast, so I already know how to deal with this. So it's new. Which leads to the second point, which is embracing uncertainty. Anti-fragility encourages individuals to embrace uncertainty rather than fear it. So I think that's interesting. And sometimes we try to run from it. And I've talked about Job in the Bible, and it talks about how what happened to him, although he overcame it, what happened to him was based off of his fear. So when you give fear the ability to live, it will, and then what you fear will happen. So that's why you can't live that's another reason why you can't live in a state of fear. And then basically it says that embracing uncertainty allows individuals to develop a flexible mindset, adjust their expectations, and focus on what they can control, which you highlighted and said earlier. And then the last point of the mental health part is talking about some learning from failure. Anti-fragility emphasizes the importance of learning from failures and setbacks. This concept aligns with the idea that viewing failures as a learning opportunity can lead to personal growth and improved mental health. Studies suggest that adopting a growth mindset and learning from mistakes can increase psychological well-being. So a lot of good points right there, I think. The research was researching. So anything you want to add to that before I move to the next part?
Two quick things. One about the fear piece. So it's so interesting you bring that up, Izzy, because prior to my cancer diagnosis, I did have a deep fear of being diagnosed with some kind of serious illness. And I used to pray about this and I would say, please don't let me get sick. Please don't let me, get diagnosed with anything. And then all of a sudden, what happens? I get diagnosed with cancer. And whether you believe in self-fulfilling prophecies or not, right, and what we put out there will come true, I do believe to a large degree what we focus on will come to fruition. And by focusing on what we don't want, it's actually giving our brain a mental hoop to jump through. And this is where my psychology background comes in a little bit. A lot of people don't know this, but your brain can't process negative language. If I say, think of a blue tree, What's the first thing you think of?
A tree, a
A blue
regular.
tree, right? If I were to
Okay.
say, "Don't think of a blue tree," what
Oh,
was the
okay.
first thing you would think of?
Right.
A blue tree, right? Because our mind has to think of the thing we're telling it not to do before it cannot do that thing. So it gives your brain like the speed bump, and by telling it what you don't want, you're actually telling it to focus on that thing. And so, a simple thing that we could do, all of us across the board, every day and every moment to improve our mental health is actually focus on our language. What are we saying to ourselves? Are you worried about something that you don't want to happen? Well,
Right.
what is it that you do want to happen and shift your focus there instead? So that's the first point. And the second point, too, you talked about adaptability. And I love that word. And I think that does encompass what anti-fragility is about. Whether you believe we evolved from gorillas or not, right? Evolution is kind of this idea of things adapting to stressors, to chaos, to uncertainty over time. So you think about your lifetime and you think about how, in a very micro way, we can do the same thing as humans. From the moment we're born to the moment we're put 6 feet under the ground, we too can evolve and we can adapt. Unlike, other things that are more fragile that can't withstand the pressure, that break under pressure. So just those 2 points. I think everything you mentioned there was so well said and a lot to think about.
Absolutely. I got that good research. I know how to do the look. My degree didn't help with nothing else. It taught me how to research. All right. So in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 2 through 4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whether you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may mature and complete, not lacking in anything. Just real quick, speaking on that, I think that's interesting. Perseverance is another word that's good, and maturing. You know, even if we relate it back and metaphorically to the plant, the plant needs that to mature, because again, what happens if it's outside, the sun not shining today, the clouds, then what? Or it's a harsh rain that day. It needs to be able to have been through that stagnancy in order to grow, and so that when those things do come, it won't be uprooted and destroyed. And then so keep that in mind too, people. All right, so now industry plant segment. So dormancy, for those, I said I was going to break it down. Did my research. Dormancy is a stage in a plant's life cycle when its growth and development are temporarily suspended. All right, it is a state of reduced metabolic activity that helps plants survive unfavorable environmental conditions. Nice segue. During dormancy, plants conserve energy and resources until conditions become more favorable for growth and reproduction. Dormancy can occur in different parts of a plant depending on the species. However, the most common form of dormancy is observed in the bud, seeds, and underground structures like bulbs and tubers. So just quick little, comment on that. Again, like I just said, they have to learn how to survive in unfavorable conditions, because you won't live in sunshine and rain every single day. And a lot of stuff we talked about already actually was ahead of schedule, which still works. And I like how she talked about some of the worst things she could ever think of came to life. So if you thinking about something, and this not even a tip section, but this is what I want people to do. Like, when you thinking about the worst thing, get a piece of paper, write the opposite of that, the best thing, and really focus on that. Because I'm a firm believer, when you really have fear of something, even I can't think of every scenario right now. There's something that'll probably come up as we go along. But I think of some of the situations that have happened to me. I was like, I kept dreading this. I kept thinking about this. And then boom, it happened. So that was just a reminder and a refresher for me. So thank you again for sharing your story. And I know somebody who listening, I believe somebody that'll see this episode will happen to is going through thyroid cancer at the time. And it is a help, or somebody who went through it and then they can relate. All right, so let's go to the next segment, which is I challenge that. And as always, we have to challenge what's going on and kind of challenge anti-fragility in this case. So when I look at extreme cases of dormancy or anti-fragility, so obviously, like I kind of mentioned, if I gave you the scenario of a plant and say, for instance, she's from Louisiana. I'm from St. Louis, but I live in Houston, so we know about hurricanes. And so God forbid your plant is outside. It survived that storm, but then a hurricane came and now it's gone, right? So that's an extreme case. You know, a little cheesy, but I look at Batman, right? So Batman, and for those that don't know his origin, his backstory, to become Batman, or how he became, his parents, he watched his parents get murdered. So in that case, could you have say now again, we kind of said earlier, but we still are human. But earlier the scripture talks about, count it all pure joy when we go through all types of trials. And it doesn't specifically say, no, this one and not that one. It counts them all. But as someone with the background in mental health, what do you say to someone who may be saying, okay, this just happened, that's, I knew somebody whose parent, his mother and his grandmother died in a car accident. How do I come back from that?
Yeah. This actually goes back to something my mom used to always tell me. She would say, Courtney, when I was a little girl growing up and I'd get frustrated with something or I'd be sick, a stomach bug or I'd have a cold or something and I'd be complaining about how I didn't feel well. And it felt, when you're sick, you feel like it's never going to end. You're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad.
Yeah.
And she would just look at me and she would just say, honey, time heals. And I would kind of roll my eyes and be like, whatever, mom, like, okay, time. Yeah, of course. That's the last thing I want to do is to feel bad for another day. But as I get older and I'm more mature now and I look back and I realize in my own life how time really does heal.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share this with you, Izzy. Last November, I got a text about 8 a.m. one morning from a family. We have a little group text. And the text said, it was a news article. And the news article said 2 people had been brutally murdered. Their bodies were burned beyond recognition in my hometown, which is about an hour north of the city here. Small town where nothing ever happens. I mean, you barely hear of drug raids or anything. Like there's nothing. It's a very slow, sleepy town. So this was big news. We get another text about 15, 20 minutes later from my sister who said, I hate to be the one to say this, but 2 of our dear family friends went missing last night. And it's believed that it could be them. They're investigating all of this. Of course, all of our hearts just sink in that moment. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think about anything. Come to find out through all the lab results and everything, it took some time. It was about a week or so before we had confirmation. But it was our 2 dear family friends, one of whom I had just seen about 3 weeks before. We had a great conversation. And both of these people were people that were so full of life, the best kind of people, the people you would think they never deserve that, right? It makes you question everything. Why did that happen to them? Why them? Why now? Why our town? Why this city? Why? And in that moment, I just remember I couldn't focus on anything else for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that, about 2 months later, the holidays came and went. And I got a phone call. I was giving a talk in Orlando about podcasting. And I got a phone call in the airport on my way home that my aunt, who I am very close to, my godmother, grew up with her through the years, had passed away. And those 2 events really sent me into a spiral there for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This was recent. This was about 6 months ago. This wasn't this long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all these questions. And it seemed like such a dark time. And hearing something when you're in that dark season, like, oh, time heals, it sounds so cliche. You just want to dismiss it. You're like, that's not what I need to hear right now. But I also know that all of the dark seasons that we face are temporary.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it in the moment. But I like to look at it like this. Psalm 23 says, even though I walk in the dark valley, I fear no evil. And so often in our life, we're faced with these valleys. We want to be at the peak of the mountain where things are great and the sun shines and life is good. But in order to get to the peak, we got to go through the valley first. And this goes back to your point about dormancy earlier. The valley's dark. Nothing looks like it's happening in the valley, and it seems like it's never going to end. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. But life is a series of peaks and valleys. And to get to the next peak, we got to go through the valley first. So in those moments, if you're listening right now and you're in a really dark place and you're facing something in your life that you're like, I don't know how I'm going to come back from this. First, you got to believe that you will. It may not be today, probably won't be tomorrow, but time heals. So just hold on to that. Hold on to that as you move through this dark valley in your life.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Um, so with dormancy, here are some potential negative aspects of dormancies. As we talked about again, we talk about the challenging part of it, and it just says reduced productivity. It says this can lead to significant reduction in plant productivity as far as things being halted. Produce like fruits and flowers that are fragile and aren't strong like they should be, which in a case, and I know this kind of, it's not corny, but I remember watching a video yesterday. And I didn't peep it, but Instagram trolls peep everything. So I was watching this video, this girl cooking this like taco. And so when she was cooking it, I didn't notice it. They was like, "Oh, you cooked it so well, you changed the pan." So clearly what happened was she messed up, but the trolls, they peep everything. She messed up and then she switched the pan over for the TikTok and made it to where, it was like a full product. And so even in situations like that, and I think about this, about the plant producing weak flowers and fruits and things, that's still needed. I feel that, it's kind of like with anything, because how do you master something if you never fail? You look at baking a cake, you didn't become the best baker making the cakes that was baking cakes that was just perfect the first time. You studied that, you did that for as long as it took. And even with the whole podcasting thing, I remember when I first started, because we're gonna get to your podcast in a minute, but I first started, I remember getting 10 listens from people that I knew, you know every 2 weeks seemed like 10 listens. And then it was to the point where now, like I said the other day, I'm getting trolled on YouTube. I'm doing something right. So, it's we going up. All right. So the next ones I'm just gonna kind of briefly go over them is delayed ecological interactions. And it just talks about this can affect the time of you interacting with other people as far as dormancy, and how this could impact pollination and the seed dispersal process. And then the other one was vulnerability to environmental stress. While dormancy helps plants withstand unfavorable conditions, it exceeds periods of dormancy can make them more vulnerable to stress factors, which again, in some cases, that's basically saying dormancy, the good side of dormancy, you can, go through anything. Well, this is actually a great point. But then the other side of dormancy, which it says basically right here, that it can make it to where they struggle harder when it's hard to exit that because of the diseases, pests, or climates and things like this are going to happen. So then my question is, if you relate it to a person, that basically means that the trauma they didn't overcome, that plant didn't overcome the trauma. So then that means this person, relating it to a person, that they're easily triggered by a certain thing. And I'm getting to the point where if I'm triggered by something personally, because obviously I can talk about a plant, but if I'm easily triggered by something, that's kind of when you need to go back into the what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just go back into the lab, I guess we'll use that, and figure out what is this? Why are you easily still triggered by this? Why is this has such a hold on you? Because it's clearly something there that isn't, and you maybe can get obviously more expertise in that.
Yeah, something that comes to mind is something a mentor of mine once told me that now I share every chance I can because it's so true is what you resist will persist. If we don't go back, we're not willing to face whatever that was that we went through and actually, because here's the beautiful thing about anti-fragility is a little side note here, is that sometimes in our life we go through hard things and we don't grow from it. It's just hard. We become more resilient. We might have experienced a trauma and we're like, I'm going to protect myself now. I'm not going to let that happen again, right? This is going to be something I'm never going to go through that again, right? I'm not going to be fooled, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, that kind of thing, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, I'm strong now, I'm resilient. I'm not going to let that get me. But then, like you said, we get triggered by something because it's something unhealed in our past. So anti-fragility, I believe, works two ways. It can work in the moment when you are aware that this is a difficult thing, that it's not something you're going through, it's something you're growing through, right? And you shift that language and you shift that perspective. And even though it's hard, like the 6 months ago I was telling you about, that was a really hard season, but I just was in a place mentally where I knew something good would come of it. I've also been in those hard places in my life where I didn't want to grow from the situation. It was just friggin' hard.
Yeah.
But you could also, in your future, like your present self, go back to your past self and work through those unhealed hurts and still reap the growth and still reap the rewards, even if it's something that happened to you when you were 5 years old. And now you're 25 or 30 or 35 looking back, working to heal that. You can still go back and get the lesson. It's still there for you. If it's something that's recurring and a problem that keeps happening, chances are you didn't learn the lesson that you needed, and it will continue happening. What you resist persists. It will continue happening until you go back and heal that. And one other thing you mentioned about dormancy that I think is really interesting, we're kind of challenging this whole idea of antifragility and dormancy. And, in our culture, I think we're very conditioned to believe that being in a dormant state, taking time off because you need some space, you need a mental health break, taking a social media break, taking a sabbatical, right? Maybe quitting your job and just floating for a while because you're not sure what's next, right? We
Right.
look at that as something unhealthy, that there's something wrong with us because we're so conditioned to always be doing and be achieving. But I think that we need to challenge that belief and look at dormancy as something that is necessary.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very necessary in order for the growth to happen. And that, when you're in a season like that where you feel maybe a little embarrassed or your ego is bruised because you're having to take a step back and you're wondering what this means about you and what people think about you,
Right.
that it's happening because it's something that you need and you just got to own it. And it's okay to do that.
And we talked about that some weeks ago, just owning it and just being okay with it as far as just letting it happen. Because sometimes we try to, like you said, what you resist, persist. And we'll be here all day with that one. I ain't gonna lie. All right, so let's move into the next segment, which is the weekly sabbatical. And so you've reached the $1 million milestone. Congrats. Is this is a significant it's significant for any entrepreneur, any business owner. So now, what are some essential system structures and support mechanisms that you believe are crucial for businesses to reach this mark?
Yeah. So we talk about 4 systems a lot, and I'm teaching on systems. And it has to do with the 4 aspects of what really makes up a successful business: your visibility and your marketing. So, a strong
Mhm.
visibility system, your sales system, right? How are we actually bringing revenue in through the door? And then your deliverability, which is one that gets overlooked a lot, but it has to do with, are your clients getting the experience that you've promised them? Is your product or your program delivering on what you've promised in such a way that they're going to rave about you and refer you to their friends, their family, the people they know who could use what you offer? And then the fourth and final one is operations, which most people overlook. I'm guilty of that. I don't want to think about the legal stuff and the tax stuff and the bookkeeping stuff, right? I didn't get into business to do all of that. When the reality is, that's the glue that holds a business together. It's the backbone. And without it, you might find yourself in legal trouble. Or you might look in your bank account one day and realize, oh, holy cow, there's not as much money there as I thought there was, right? And we wind up in
Right.
these situations. But, at a 30,000-foot level, these are the 4 systems every business needs to be successful. You look at any successful company, they have all 4 of these systems in place. And so a lot of times I'll get the question from people who are in that stage of business where they're growing and they're transitioning to getting to a place where they can begin to scale is, well, what system do I focus on? Where do I start? What do I need to look at first? And it depends on where you are in business and what your goals are. But what I like to do is I like to break the year out. We have 4 quarters in a year, right? 4 90-day segments, and to focus on one segment, one system every quarter. So maybe quarter 1, you're focusing on improving your visibility, because the biggest problem in your business right now is not having consistent leads coming in, right? You don't have the customers to sell to. Well, we got to work on visibility first. Maybe quarter 2, you're focused on sales, quarter 3, deliverability, quarter 4, operations. And that gives you a nice system to your system, so to speak, to be touching these aspects of your business on a regular basis so that you can continue to tweak and improve. Because once you reach a certain point, 0 to 6 figures is a lot about learning what you need to learn to grow and to maintain that revenue level. 6 to 7 figures is about the fine tuning and the iterations to take you further, faster. So that's a high level look, but those are the 4 systems that we teach.
Okay. So now you're a wife, you're a mother, you're an entrepreneur, and you have a podcast. So now we've kind of she's kind of like hinted at it throughout the episode. And so I want you to tell the people the name of the podcast, tell the people how the podcast came about, and then how do you balance that with your personal and professional life?
Yeah. So the podcast, this may come as no surprise, but it's called Anti-Fragile Entrepreneurship. And that's what the show's about navigating and growing through the ups and downs of the online business journey, the entrepreneurial journey. And about 3 years ago, a little more than that, 3.5 years or so, I was in the growing stages of my business and trying to figure out, I was testing a lot of different marketing strategies. I was doing social media, I was dabbling in Facebook ads. TikTok didn't even exist at the time. So I was doing what most people would do, right? They put a post up on social media and they'd post 3 to 5 times a week. And that post would get buried in the news feed and it wouldn't get much traction. And no one was DMing me asking how to work with me. And I have a 5-year-old. He's 5 now, but at the time he was about 18 months and he was home with me. Wasn't in daycare, wasn't in school. So I had very limited time to work on my business in the day. Pretty much when he was napping, that was it. I'd check my email and I would do whatever marketing I could do and do the client work I could do in that time frame. So I just got really sick and tired of spending my time, the limited time that I had, creating content that would just disappear in 24 hours or not get pushed out to the people who needed it because the algorithm didn't think it was that valuable or that popular, right? Because people didn't engage with it in a certain window of time. And I was just tired of playing that game. And I was listening to podcasts, trying to figure out what can I do differently? What can I do better to get more leads, get more sales, right? Grow this business, grow my following. And so I'd strap my son into his stroller and we would walk the neighborhood and I would just listen to podcast episode after episode until finally one day it dawned on me, Courtney, you could be doing this.
Right.
Maybe the podcast is the answer you've been looking for. That was it. That was the spark that I needed. And that kind of lit the flame under this idea. So I launched the podcast in February of 2020. This was like literally 3 weeks before everything shut down for the pandemic.
Perfect time.
Perfect time, right? So we launched that show, and within about 48 hours, we had over 65 five-star reviews. Now, I don't say that to brag or to boast or to be like, oh, we had this amazing success. But what it did was it taught me a lot early on out the gate about podcasting, about what was effective. And of course, some things too that I learned along the way that were not effective. But what it did was it got people in my community reaching out, asking me, Courtney, how did you do that? Can you teach me how to do that? I want to launch a podcast, but I don't want to launch a podcast nobody listens to. I want it to be successful. So I said, sure. So I started teaching people what I did. And very quickly, I realized, this is very much in alignment with my deeper purpose in life and in my business, which is to help entrepreneurs use their voice to make a positive difference in the world. And it breaks my heart to see so many entrepreneurs with such great messages not getting heard, having a lot of knowledge, but feeling like that unheard expert, despite everything they're doing to try to grow their business and their following. And how a podcast can really unlock so much leverage in your marketing and contribute to building an anti-fragile business. Because with a podcast, it gives you this system to market your business, to expand your authority, to connect with your audience in a much deeper way than you can in a 15-second video, and build trust, which increases sales and traffic and gets you the results that you want. And so now it's one aspect of what we do, under the broader umbrella of our company is we teach people how to launch top 1% podcasts, business owners specifically, who want to get their message out there. And it ties back into this idea of anti-fragility and what really the purpose my podcast serves, which is, thought leadership in this specific area that is of interest of mine. And like you said, it's an emerging field. It's something I'm really fascinated by and I'm really just enjoying exploring. So if you love listening to podcasts, I would love to have you come check ours out and, leave me a review. Let me know what you think of the show. Send me a DM on Instagram. Let me know if it's impactful for you.
Well, definitely. So I think it's interesting because the episode that we're talking about today, I look at dormancy, honestly, anti-fragility, especially in the podcasting world. I look at it like an arrow. So if you're shooting an arrow, you got to go back. And so you thinking, this is personal. So you thinking, oh, I'm not going up. What's going on? And this is not hating anything like that, but you see everybody else shooting up. And then it seemed like you going the other way. It seemed like you was doing okay, decent, and it just kind of. So now I look at it kind of like an arrow to where you go back, but then, and not saying this you're better than anybody, but you shoot up. When you go up, it's it just supersedes everything. And I think that's kind of where PSA is now, that season of going up, because it was just so many weeks I was so confused. I'm like, why am I not, and I ain't gonna lie, yeah, I use the chat GPT, I finesse it. I'd be telling it, I'll take my scripts and I'll say create a description that is best for YouTube's algorithm and was for very descriptive, long buzzwords, so that the system know what to do. And so I was seeing traction with that at first, and it just seemed like out of nowhere, just like and I'm like, what are we not doing? So, I think it's just also with whoever you are, whatever you're doing, and everybody obviously not gonna start a podcast, so I don't want to drift on this too long. But with that, I think it's just about, and you use this for any other business strategy, but finding your specific, we hear it all the time, niche, but really drilling that really to the point where people are just tired of hearing it, like pretend as if you hit them in the head with a hammer and just kept going. They dead, but you just still hitting them. Like it's like that. It has to be.
Yeah.
So,
What a great
okay.
analogy of the arrow. I love that. It's
Yeah.
funny you say that too, because if you look at our podcast cover, there is an arrow there. It's kind of hidden. You might not notice it at first, but that's such a beautiful metaphor. I'm so glad you shared that.
Thank you. I heard it somewhere. I can't remember where, but I heard it somewhere.
That's neat.
All right. So now for those going back to the topic as we move into we ending off for the day, but going into the topic. And so you're a person, bad things happen. You're in that dark season. You're maybe not in the darkest of the season, but you still haven't fully come back. I did some research and I found some ways that you can, that some things that I do as well, that you can kind of, recover when these things happen. And with her psychology background, she'll be able to dispel or agree or whatever needs to be. So you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. The first one says practice gratitude. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who regularly practice gratitude reported higher levels of positive emotion, life satisfaction, and a sense of purpose. So, focusing on gratitude, you can shift your attention from negative aspects to positive ones, and allows for joy. And I think that's great too. Seeking personal growth, studies show that individuals who perceive challenges as events of opportunities for personal growth tend to experience higher levels of well-being. And then it says that embracing challenges can provide a sense of purpose and meaning. And again, like we said earlier, finding joy. This third one I liked. It talks about building social connections, and it talks about strong social connections and support systems have consistently associated with increased well-being and resilience, and that actively seeking support from friends and family support groups during tough times can provide comfort, encouragement, and a sense of belonging. And this comes from, where does this come from? A journal published in Psychology Today. So I like those. I think those are great. I like the support system thing because it's not like you don't have to think about it like an AA meeting, like you have to go sit in a circle with people. We got social media now, and a lot of these groups, like we're podcasters. I'm sure she's in podcast group. I'm in a few different ones. Whatever that you're looking for, they have it, good and bad. So just keep that in mind. Yeah. So what's your take on those few things? For actually the last question before we move into the final thing.
Yeah, so the gratitude one I do believe is very important. It's a very powerful emotion. I think we look at it the wrong way a lot of times, though. We usually think or tend to believe that gratitude comes after the fact, and I think it should come before the fact. What
Yeah.
I mean by that is a lot of times we wait for good things to happen and then we feel grateful, right? It's kind of a natural response to good things that happen in our life. But what would happen if you did practice a little bit of gratitude a minute every day? And just look at your life, look at how much you've overcome to get where you are, look at what you're grateful for in this moment. I'm really grateful for this hot cup of coffee right now. I didn't get a good night of sleep last night. This is kind of my fuel keeping me going, right? And I just to feel that feeling of gratitude and start creating these micro moments of gratitude throughout your day. It goes back to what we mentioned earlier in this episode is what you think about will come to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can start to be proactive about your gratitude instead of reactive about it, meaning practice gratitude now and the good things will come versus waiting for the good things to come and then being grateful for it, you can actually start to bring about good things in your life because you're focus will be more attuned to looking to the good. And a very practical way that I like to do this, speaking of arrows, I have an arrow journal.
Mm.
And I read a book, this was about a year or so ago, and the author was talking about how in our life and in these dark seasons, we often look for answers. We want the answer. We want the answer. We want to move out of this dark season. It's uncomfortable. We don't like it. We don't want to be there. And she said, you need to stop looking for the answers. Start looking for the arrows that are pointing you in the direction you need to go. And I thought that was so profound. That really hit me. And I started keeping an arrow journal where I try to do this daily. It doesn't always happen daily, but ideally it would be on a daily basis where you just look back over your day and maybe you notice one, maybe it's two, maybe it's five things. Doesn't matter the number, how many it is, but what were the little arrows today, those little confirmations that were maybe moments that you couldn't have orchestrated yourself? It was something that happened that you were like, whoa, I didn't see that, or this good thing happened today. Where are those arrows pointing? Sometimes just by tracking that, getting in that habit of looking at the good things that are happening, we become more attuned to the good things that are happening.
Absolutely. I love it. So again, last question. Your vision involves redefining thought leadership and catalyzing positive change in the world. We know that. So what are some key strategies that you can say? You don't have to go into full detail. They'll have to come to your podcast for that. But what are just a few strategies that for upcoming podcasters so that they can replicate your success and gain visibility? Maybe like 4 or 5.
Yeah. So for people specifically who are looking to launch podcasts, or for people in general who want to get their message out in a bigger way?
What do we do? Let's do, how about 3 and 3? 3 for people who are trying to launch a podcast and 3 who just want to get their message out.
All right. If you want to launch a podcast, you need to get clear on who it's for.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get clear on the main problem you're solving for that person. And you need to get clear on how specifically you help them solve that problem. And then you need to tie your answers to those 3 things into your show title, your cover art, your description, your episode titles. Those kind of act as the gatekeepers of your content. Before someone can get to the awesome content in your episode, they got to get through those 4 gates first.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure that all of those are pointing directly to who your podcast is for, what specific problems it's helping them solve, and how you specifically are going to help them solve those problems, because that's what's going to help you attract, keep, and convert those listeners, both now and over time. It's something that we call, more of a technical term, is creating a marketable podcast. Because it's one thing to know about marketing and to try to market a show, but it's another thing to have a marketable show. And then the marketing becomes easy. So that's on the podcasting side. On the message side, and just if you are someone, quick little backstory here. When I was 9 years old, my mom told me, Courtney, your mouth is what gets you in trouble. Go to your room. And this was something she told me frequently. She would slap me. She would tell me, like, shut up, like, just stop, and I was very sassy, and I was always like coming back at her with stuff. And I could see why she would get frustrated, as a mother. I get it. But what that taught me, and this was, my mother did not mean to do this, but it turned into something that for me became kind of low-grade traumatic, because it made me stop using my voice. And for about 20 plus years, I would hide. I would hide behind other people. I would hide behind a version of what I thought people wanted to see from me. And it became very difficult for me to speak up for myself, to express, my needs, to say what I wanted. As friends in college would be like, where do you want to go to dinner? Let's go out. Where do we want to go? I'd be like, wherever y'all want to go, it's fine, right? Like, I would never share my opinions. I would never, put my stake in the ground and, hey, this is what I think. This is what I want. And it took a lot of work to get to a place where now, I do use my voice so much more freely than I ever have. And of course, I'm still growing every day in that aspect. But first, I would say, if you have a message that you want to share, you have something you're passionate about, you need to look at what's holding you back from sharing that message. What's keeping you from going out there and talking to people about it, making a ripple about it, speaking about it. What's holding you back? And start there. Then from there, once you kind of get the internal blocks out of the way, you can begin to refine that message.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties into what I said on the podcasting side. Who's the message for? How does that message serve people? In what way does it help them solve a problem or overcome some kind of pain in their life? Because as humans, we're hardwired to avoid pain more than we are to achieve goals or desires.
Right.
We can help someone remove something that's causing pain in their life, then it frees them up to achieve that desire. And you add massive value to their life when you can do that.
All right. So finally, y'all, let's move into the final segment, game time. And this game is called anti-fragility or disaster. So in this scenario, I'm going to name like 4 or 5 scenarios, and you're going to tell me, and even though it's a disaster, you can still recover from it, but we're going to call it that. So I want you to tell me whether this is anti-fragility or no, that's a disaster. Like,
Okay.
all right. A company faced a sudden market downturn, forcing them to reassess their business strategy and innovate.
Could be anti-fragility. It's a disaster if the industry is a dying industry. Think
Mm.
Blockbuster, newspapers. Don't stay on those trains. But if it's just a downturn and it's causing a pivot point, then it's an opportunity for innovation.
A person loses their job unexpectedly, leading them to explore new career paths and then discover their true passion. So,
It's definitely an opportunity for anti-fragility, for sure.
a city experienced a massive earthquake, resulting in widespread destruction and loss of life.
I think good can come of it. I lived through Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ida. It's devastating, but that's one of those situations where time can heal. It takes a long time, but I think good can come of that. So I would put that into anti-fragility.
A sports team loses a crucial match, leading to decreased morale and performance in subsequent games.
I think there's opportunity for anti-fragility there too. What are you learning from this experience? What caused the loss and what can you do differently?
A family experiences financial setback but uses it as an opportunity to reassess their spending habits and prioritize their needs.
I think that's a good thing as well. If what you said about reprioritizing their needs actually happens, if they just continue those bad spending habits, so that could be disastrous. But if you're actually using that as an opportunity to make positive change, that's a good thing.
All right, last one. Being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, then overcoming it, and 10 years later celebrating.
Oh, you set me up for that one. Anti-fragility for sure.
All right. So, question and challenge for the day. This is for the people. Make sure y'all participate. Y'all get money. $10 on $10. The first one that gets $10, second one 15, third one 25 on Cash App. All right. So describe an instance in when you faced a challenging situation and had to bounce back from it. And were you able to make a full recovery? So that second part of the answer for y'all could be, oh, I'm still recovering. That's fine too, because at least you are acknowledging everything. This week we set it up for dormancy, but it's funny because as we transition into next week's episode and the next guest, it's funny because it leads into the next part of a plant because we talked about dormancy and all that stuff. But what happens when a plant deals with poison ivy? What happens when you run into poison ivy? What do you do then? So you'll have to tune in next week for that one. But Courtney, thank you for coming through. Anything as you want to say as you leave out? Anything you want to plug? Anything?
Izzy, thank you again for having me. This has been so much fun. Again, if you love listening to podcasts, I'd love for you to come check mine out. Whatever app you're listening on right now, just type in my name or anti-fragile entrepreneurship. You'll find it. One little thing that I did mention but kind of glossed over in our conversation was this idea of changing your language to change your mental state. It's very powerful. So next time that you are going through something difficult and someone asks you, "Hey, how you doing? How's life really been for you lately? How are you really doing?" And you're like, "Man, it's been hard. I'm just going through some tough stuff." I want you to stop. I want you to notice that. And I want you to change that language and say, "I'm growing through some tough stuff."
All right. We love to see it. All right, y'all. So tune in to next week. It's going to be great. P.S.A. signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurts. Remember who you are. Make your mind up. Don't let it make you. And I love us for real.